So I'd like to talk about the four elements in Hermetics. But to start, I want to talk about like the three levels. And Franz Bardon and other Hermeticists and many traditions, this all of Western mysticism generally kind of builds off this unbroken strain of Hermeticism in many ways, in my opinion. They have three levels of reality: physical, astral, and the spiritual. And that applies to the micro and the macro, the micro being the individual person. So there's almost those kinds of three levels in me, which Bardon corresponds to the body for the physical, the psyche for the astral, and the mind or the spirit for the spiritual. And to understand the four elements, I think obviously, the difficult part, or the part that requires some sense of intuitive knowledge of the law of correspondence and analogies, is moving from the physical to the astral. I mean, obviously, in the physical world, we know what fire, water, earth, and air are. That's the physical world we see. Now moving into the astral plane, or moving inward to the psyche and the emotions, or the inner body, talking about the elements like that becomes something different, and that's where you start talking about, the elements as this magical thing, as this mystical thing. You're no longer just talking about literal physical water, but it's basically the psychological or emotional or psychic or astral version of physical water, just like it is with air, earth, and fire. So you're basically it's basically, a simple way and a starting point, and it goes a little deeper than this, but if we're going to go from the physical to the astral, with the elements, you can just start thinking of it in terms of psychological qualities. Fiery, somebody that's fiery, what are they? Kind of angry, maybe hatred, maybe vitality even, just a lot of charge of energy rushing up in some way, the flow of blood, getting hot under the collar. We have all these analogies for everything. Water, what would emotional water be? Well, I think of fluid emotions running through me. You can think of empathy as water. Water's kind of just taking on the form of what's around it. And empathy is kind of literally empathizing and putting yourself in another person's shoes. You're kind of taking on that form and being like, okay, I'm really right there with you. That's what they talk about empaths. And empaths having difficulty because they start taking on all the energy, and that's a very water thing, to take on the energy of everything around you. And then, the danger being you lose your own sense of boundaried self. And then air, you're kind of more up into what? Thoughts, maybe? You picture like, well, what's an emotional version of being out in a clear field or the desert with the wind blowing? What do you think of it whisking everything away? Maybe that's a kind of cleansing. Maybe that's a kind of cleaning out, a detoxifying with the air element. Or it can be airy, lost in space, daydreaming. That's more in the pejorative sense. But air can definitely be associated with thoughts, and because just like we can't necessarily see air, you can't necessarily identify thoughts. We could identify parts of the brain, and we can identify when there's activity in the brain, but it's not like if but it's an astral thing. the thought. It's on the psychic level. I mean, it's not like you're going to, do an MRI and be like, wait, you see the words written out in somebody's skull, like, I am really tired right now. No, you don't see that. You don't literally see that thought. And people that do kind of see or know or sense other people's thoughts, that's a kind of clairvoyance. Again, into the astral realm. And so earth, you talk about somebody being grounded, that's a kind of grounding. So those are all the kind of loose associations to get you there, but I don't think that's necessarily the whole story, because to really when you start to talk about working with the elements, you're not just working with psychological associations between things. I mean, it's fun to play the association game, but we're here to do some sort of magical or hermetic or alchemical practices. And so the way I start to think about it is, once you start to you kind of unrepress and open up your consciousness enough, all your emotions basically and your sensations become just, it just seems like it's this system of energy flowing through you. And that's where you get a lot of the more New Age talk, energy, that kind of energy. But it's really kind of, it kind of starts out as an emotional thing. So it's like, I think you can get to a point where basically your emotions all kind of go into four categories, being the four elements. Or if you want to add, the Akasha or God or light as the fifth, okay. But that almost seems a little bit more like the center, the balancing center of all four of them, rather than some other feeling. It's almost like a kind of net result of good balance, at least in my experience. So what can happen is you can almost start to feel, your earth inside of you, feel your fire, feel your water, feel your air. And you can sense that on the inside of you, the elements, and then you can sense it on the outside. And then you can open up the gate between the inner and outer. I mean, if you walk into a room and the room's got some bad energy, it looks kind of nasty, you can almost start to feel the water element, in yourself. And just imagine yourself completely as water, all flowing through you. And then start sending that water out into the room, as if you're just washing the whole room with astral water. And likewise, you could go the other way. If you feel like you're out of touch with your own water element, you could go jump in the pool. You could sit in a whirlpool. You could take a shower. You could run your hands underwater. And you could breathe that water element on the outside into your inside. So really, it's almost like a kind of quality of the deepest kinds of emotional flow in the internal space. And that's for the individual. And then going out, it's that same thing in either the atmosphere or encountering it in another person. And so if you just kind of start to think of all the qualities and energies and sensations and kind of senses you get, and just of experiencing the world all the time, and you're experiencing them all as one of the elements, or a combination of elements. Or, you walk into a place where something's not quite right, well, something's out of balance. What elements are the strongest ones here? Which ones are the weakest? And it starts to seem abstract, but the way I think that it becomes something very real for people, and in a sense, I think you've got to find this subjectively for yourself. You've got to kind of connect your own lived experience with, what they're talking about in magic books. I mean, because it's not like there's this, air element or fire element like out here. It's something you already know inside you. You may just not have connected it quite there yet. So I think you kind of have to come to your own grooves in a sense, and just to kind of develop these emotional muscles. And sometimes it's hard because things can get blocked up inside you. Sometimes I might think of profound, or just a clean sadness. If you've ever felt a sense of sadness, but it was just a good sadness, and you feel it almost flowing through you like water, it kind of feels good. But if there's some sort of repression or conflict, that water kind of gets tangled up, and then, kind of like it gets caught in the earth, and then you get heavy. And that's kind of when sadness turns to depression. So those are just all some ways of thinking about it. But it starts out as this kind of lived emotional experience, and then it can start to turn to something you're just imagining, and then it becomes real. But I think it really helps to start from the inside out with some of the elements. If you really want to be able to command the elements inside you. And that's another aspect I like about Bardon in the very beginning of initiation into Hermetics with the soul mirror, kind of getting all your own elements out on the table and working with them inside you, and then that's going to help you locate them in the world as well. So again, that's really just all scratching the surface, but that's kind of taking the elements from the physical to the astral, from the body to the psyche. And so I hope that helped. And subscribe to my channel, please. All right, thanks.